Hello and welcome to Learning with Lulu. In this video we are going to be doing a summary of chapter 20 in Jane Eyre. Before we jump into it, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and keep coming back around. So, in chapter 20, it's still the same night as the previous chapter, and in the night everyone's tucked into bed, if not asleep, at least quiet in their bedroom. And in the middle of the night, a very loud cry is heard. Jane hurries out into the hallway and everyone else has heard it, so it's not just something she's imagined. Rochester's there and tells like all the other guests and whatnot that have come out because they also heard the cry. He says one of the servants has just had a nightmare and he says everyone go to bed. But he, shortly after, once everyone else has dispersed, he comes to Jane's door and gets her and says, essentially like, I need you to come with me, and he needs her help with something. He also makes sure that she is not queasy or has an issue with the sight of blood. She's willing to help, and so she goes with him, and they go to the third story of the house. And they go into this room and Mr. Mason is there and he is bleeding profusely and obviously been attacked by something or someone. Mr. Rochester tells them not to talk. You get the sense that he doesn't want Jane really knowing what happened here. But he has Jane put pressure on the wound that is bleeding, and he leaves to go get a doctor. And it feels like a very long time that they are gone. In the meantime, Jane observes some of the things in the room. She notices a crucifix and studies that for a little bit. And within time, Rochester does come back with a surgeon and they start to mend and take care of Mr. Mason. Once that process is done, Mr. Rochester then asks Jane to go get something, like a medicine, and when she grabs it and takes it back to Mr. Rochester, he gives it to Mr. Mason, and I'm assuming it's some sort of like stimulating drug, because he's like, it's gonna give you enough energy for an hour. And Mr. Rochester, he basically wants Mr. Mason to have vitality for at least an hour because he wants to get him out of the house. And that's exactly what happens. Mr. Mason leaves, is sent away, and Rochester is done with that. Jane is obviously exhausted from a long, kind of confusing, frightening night. But nonetheless, almost, I don't think it's in a way of like Mr. Rochester is not allowing her to go rest or anything, but you get the sense that she maybe needs to process some of it. So anyway, they go for a walk together in an orchard, or in the orchard on the grounds. And we already know that Jane is one who gets a lot of rejuvenation and refreshment and like grounding from being in nature. So I think it's obviously a place that she is feeling comfortable and getting fresh air after being cooped up in a dark room with a bleeding man and the crucifix like watching over the scene all night. While they're walking, Mr. Rochester, he tells Jane a hypothetical story. And it's hypothetical. You get the sense, like he's being so hyper specific that like we know it's about him. Or if we don't know, now you know, watching this summary, that this hypothetical story is about him. And he says that if there was a young man who just did this terrible thing, made a really terrible error while living abroad, and then in order to try and like gain relief, not peace, but relief from that mistake that was made, he lives a life of just bad choices and a little bit of hedonism in order to escape it. And he says, what if finally this man has come to a point where he wants to live a life of like honesty and morality with a wife, but certain laws and social customs, conventions prevent him from doing that. He asks Jane if, casting aside custom and like social morality, like would he be justified in doing so? And Jane's response is very sweet. I love Jane Eyre, but she says like that's between that person and God. Like another person cannot tell that to you. And I want to just take note for the time that this is written. I mean, we're still in the modern 2023 age. A lot of people still allow there to be like someone that has to be there, like the middleman between them and God. And in reality, and in this moment, what Jane is saying is like that each person's relationship with God, that's theirs. There doesn't have to be another person with more authority or more like spiritual right to decide what God wants for them. So she says that's between that man and God, not that man and another person. Like I can't tell you whether that will be justified or not. At least when I'm reading, I get the sense that Rochester is like comforted by Jane's response, but then the chapter ends and he ends the conversation with saying like, do you think Blanche will be like that wife that brings salvation and justification for me? Before Jane even has a chance to answer, Rochester leaves. So that's the end of chapter 20. It's quite a shocking chapter, and it definitely takes you out of the feeling of other period drama stories. If you're watching Jane Eyre, this scene is definitely kind of, oh, whoa, like there's something terrifying living in the house. And then you get a little bit of that romantic tension between Rochester and Jane, but then he has to bring up Blanche and then leaves Jane alone in the garden or in the orchard. So that's chapter 20. I hope this video is useful to you. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and keep on coming back for more. Thanks for watching.